really loved the vibe of our last conversation with the tea. So this time I have a little cacao that I prepared.
Ooh. I have some tea.
It's
Everything has
yummy,
to happen with tea. There's no like, don't even get me out of bed unless there's tea, ever. Forget money, forget gifts, just bring me tea. That's all I need. I'm wondering if we should land here and just presence ourselves in this place and see maybe what's here, what's calling for us to be with today. So I'm noticing that before we landed here, so all day I've had a headache. It's felt like my head's been I could only just, I could vice that sort of pressure in my head. And I've had 2 really big full days with work and when I say work, it's been, working with grief, working with anti-racism, 2 consecutive days. And then this morning my body was doing as bodies can often do, expressing. My head was feeling this. And as I closed my eyes there, I just got this, the headache is complete. So whatever my body was expressing doesn't appear to be here anymore, which is really quite nice.
So, welcome to you and your clarity, my love, without your headache. What landed in me, which was I didn't even realize because I thought I'd kind of let go of it, was actually the decision that was made in the UK last night not to call a ceasefire in Gaza. And my language around kind of, and I might have expressed this already to you, Tanya, but my language around kind of in what universe is that acceptable? And then I realised it's the one that I'm in, right? I live here and it is a decision that's been made. And it reminded me, because I found myself doing it because I was travelling this morning, I felt kind of, I could feel that I was out of sorts. And I find myself wondering when I was looking at people, who were the people who decided that that was okay? Like, who were the people that back this? Because the people that voted represent us. That's supposedly how this works, right? And it reminds me of how that energetically has always felt in my body, which is wondering what they think about me just because I look like this. So it was just this whole thing that I just sense in my body that was kind of like just these layers of noticing that I was looking for them this morning, just wondering where they were, who are these people that think this way? Because it doesn't make sense. There's no belief system here that can ever make any sense. And then I was like, it reminds me of what I've been in before, which is where I've worried, about who I am as I walk in the world. Because people have these judgments that threaten me. So that's what landed for me as just the sadness around that too.
Feels really nice to hear the two of you just land in yourselves and naming what you're with. And I noticed that I relax in the presence of that, and that there's been this activation that I became aware of around, I think it's a mix of excitement of like, oh, I get to sit with the two of you. And then there's also, I noticed there's a layer of insecurity. And I think part of it is due to the fact that now there's this awareness of us recording this that feels different. Plus, now we're three. Before we're like two, there was more, I think my nervous system just being more relaxed. And then, but there's like a third dimension that I became aware of, that there's a, like an insecurity around both. On one hand, like an immense desire and yearning to have an exchange, and plus a tenderness and like a sense of insecurity around, I don't know if I can translate all the energy that is here into language, that I will find the words to somehow connect this to you too. And there's like a, like almost like a, I don't know how to do this. There's so much, but I don't know. There's like a sweetness to that, and at the same time I don't know if a sadness or a grief around the awareness of how much backlog there is of conversations that I would have wanted to have happened that haven't happened in my life, that creates this lack of familiarity in speaking about those topics. Yeah.
Yeah. I can really relate to that. And as you were sharing that, I felt tears kind of sit just behind my eyes. That was my experience. It's like, yeah, how challenging it is at times for me to know where to place words, and particularly at the moment. It's like, yeah, what arises there is that words aren't enough almost, it's like, which I think is where my body then expresses.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you can't say it. Okay. I'll do it for you.
Gives you a headache.
Yeah, gives me a headache.
Yeah, and there is a yearning to find words. There is a yearning for all parts of me to be able to catch up with what I can only describe as this. Like, I feel the words, or the digestion through words and through sharing of the channel of words, would kind of bring more order to this. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that,
And
that the
it,
words order.
yeah, and it kind of comes back to something that I found really interesting that you named, Tanya, in our last conversation, that both you and Jax have different words that you use to label yourself or to describe your identity, that kind of work for each of you, that you don't use the same word necessarily. And I think my insecurity starts in the absence of clarity of how do I describe myself? Like, what are even the words that I describe? I used to describe, like, why are we, the three of us, meeting? Like, what is the sharedness? What's the label that describes our shared experience, or the curiosity of exploring our shared experiences?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I wonder if we share, like, how do we identify in this moment? And for me, it's ever changing, but how I would say, well, on Tuesday night when I was giving a presentation and telling some of my life story, I was like, I'm a brown British Dominican, and sometimes that switches to Dominican British woman of dual heritage. And that feels like, the best fit for now. And it is just for now.
I like the just for now.
Mm.
I'm noticing that I don't really have any words today. That's so interesting. I'm noticing that I don't have any words because as far as my, I was about to say my description, because at some level
Mm.
that's what it is. It's like, oh my God, it's a description for me. Like, like when I've done that before, which is like waiting for a cab, and then someone's gone, so how would I know it's you? And I've gone, I'm the brown one with the dreadlocks. I mean, sort of that's the identity and the description. So it's like, yeah, and I suppose it follows with what came up for me as I kind of landed, which is I kind of feel like I don't belong today. So it's kind of like, so I am a brown woman. How my heritage is, I don't even want to lean into them today. I'm just not even sure what is happening out there. So as far as where I sit in this moment, I know that I am brown, and that's about it.
Mm.
Yeah, there's something in that that really touches me. That um, yeah, this flavor of I cannot pinpoint it to something, like I cannot root it down to something today.
Mm.
And it might be different in half an hour or tomorrow. But right now, I just have this sensation of not belonging, or this kind of experience of not belonging. Yeah.
When I hear the word belonging at the moment, what just comes, it's like the word belonging lands in my mind, and then belonging lands in my heart, and it's like this yearning, this longing that so many of us have. I think it seems fair to say that. I hear it so many times in this experience that we share on some levels, and also outside that. I really feel that belonging is such an intrinsic part of being human, and there's just so many different layers to it. Belonging.
Mm.
So my heart's like, belonging. It's that longing. Bring it in.
I really like that play of words, the longing to be, and there's like also the longing to just be together.
Mm.
In that, I like along the lines of labels, I really struggle. Like I wrote down some words, I think 2 days ago, when I was like trying to label myself, and I was like, and I'm like, I literally have to take my notes, like to be like, what is it that I wrote down? In that moment, it felt kind of solid. Because it happened after a conversation with a dear friend, and we're talking about colorism and just the privilege that comes from being light skinned.
Mm.
And so it kind of felt important at that moment to acknowledge that and to kind of include that in my labeling. So it ended up being I'm a light skinned bicultural Black woman, which I find really interesting because it then doesn't like, and I was like, okay, how is my, like my white lineage, is that just acknowledged through the light skinnedness? And so
Mm.
it's like then this balance of I'm a Black woman, but I'm light skinned, but I'm not like I find it so, it just kind of, my mind explodes when I try to make sense of these, like, what does it mean when I hear the two of you use the word brown? Is it literally the color of the skin that you're referring to, or is it a cultural identity that it's referring to? And then there's brown people all around the world. And is that like, I get really confused around all of it. And I feel today, it appears to me that I'm even way more confused than I usually am. And I find it
Really?
quite interesting to just, yeah, to just reveal my confusion to the both of you, because I often feel that somehow touches me and there's like tears pushing, um, that I don't feel that there's often spaces for me to be with that confusion.
Mm.
And that there's like a demand on my system to appear with some sort of solidity around my identity, or like to kind of hold labels strong, but they're so contextual that I just get jumbled and I don't know how to integrate all those labels when it's a safe space to just be me and not to be in a defensive of like, now I defend this part of my identity in contrast to whoever else is in this space. Or I fit in through this part of my identity because I do want to belong. And it's like pulling out different labels out of a box that seems to just, yeah, have so many of them.
Mm.
Yeah, so it's really nice to just be with the tenderness of like, I think I'm just overwhelmed with the labels right now.
Yeah. Thank you. And that, that the body language that you did there, that is, I can just really relate to that sense of confusion. It's like, what, who, where. And I've used that word myself a lot. Confusion. It's been like a life partner.
So I want to honour it, actually. I want to honour the word confusion, because there's an assumption by me that those of us who have mixed heritage, have blended roots, swim in confusion. And so kind of honouring it here as it just is here. And yeah, and it just is. And this kind of need, the word kept coming up, which was tethering. What do I tether to in this moment? Like what does that even look like? Does it need to be something? And I suppose for me, there's a invitation to, how might it be just not, and I think this is what you said, but how might it be in this moment not to feel that there was any need to tether anywhere? Just to be here in this swirlingness of confusion and the beauty of that at some level. Because I know it, and I know that place. So I want to kind of give that, let's kind of put that in this space. I know that place. So.
I'm noticing there's a fire in my belly as I hold that word confusion, and it represents rage of the amount of times that I've been asked who I am, where I'm from, what it looks like for others to sense make, and the ongoing journey of that, especially for younger me. And this binary world that's, is I hope it's getting less binary. I think there's a lot of conversations at the moment that are dismantling so much, but the binary world that I grew up in, that was so wanted order. We come back to the words and the order, and how I managed to give order because I needed to give order from the presentation that I gave on Tuesday night. So I could bring my ordered self. I'm a this and a that and a this and a that.
I notice I'm starting to find it hard to sit still. Like the moment you named the fire, I felt it in my own belly, and there is this, like, it so landed your words of like needing to, I don't know what exact words you said, but needing to give clarity before I have clarity. Like, it's not for me the question of where, like, naming or explaining my identity. I have to do it. It is demanded of me from the outside, and I need to explain something and clarify something to the outside from a place where I'm just confused. And I have to hold my confusion and serve the other's need for clarity that doesn't contribute to my clarity. It's just kind of like I'm still alone with my confusion, but I now have to pretend that I'm clear, but I'm not. There's something about needing to offer clarity with disregard to my own need for clarity or my own experience.
Yeah. I'm noticing I've got this is going, my hands are like this. It's like, are you brown? Well, if I've got black and white, it's better than grey, because if I put those two colours together, I'm grey. But that's clearly not the case. So I guess brown. And I'm wondering what's going on in our bodies at the moment. So I'm noticing I'm bringing my hands down to my hips.
Yeah, I also have, I'm holding my hips and I'm like,
Yeah. I'm really, with the words you said there, Jax, about tethered or untethered, and how and what that means. Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed that when you named the longing, Jax, to give space to the confusion and use the word being tethered, I had this image of like a cauldron, a circle of. In that moment, I felt tethered to the both of you in the shared experience, and I felt I didn't feel my longing to be, or my need to be tethered to anything else. It was like, oh, okay, in this moment, it's safe, it's held to, I can be with the intensity of the confusion right now because we're together in it.
And then that leads to the word safety was in my head, and you just mentioned it, which is that the space feeling safe enough, because it feels like such a relative experience, and there's something about this that Tanya and I will always say, that there's a level of safety that comes just in the shared experience. And it's really interesting sometimes, because we haven't even shared that much of an experience in this moment. Sylvie, we haven't shared that much of an experience. What we're telling you too is the fact that I know confusion. That's the tethering. So it's like, it doesn't even need to be that, we haven't gone through life stories, we haven't done any of that. I've just come in and said, I hear you and I feel it too. And then for me, there's a safety in that then allows me to kind of just move into a kind of deepening here. And that happens for me that happens for me where others share blended roots.
Yeah.
And confusion comes up a lot.
It really does.
It really does. And it comes up way more. I've held circle spaces for many years, and something about this experience, this particular unique experience, definitely brings this, I want to say, shadow in many ways, and holding that in love, but it definitely brings that. I hear it again and again, this dance with confusion, and how that is in life, the places it plays out. And for me, getting closer to my body allows me to notice it, but it hasn't gone away. It's not like, I can witness it now and go, oh, this part, and like what you were doing there earlier, Sylvie, was this, this, it's that literally speaks to what happens within me.
It really helps me to get clearer around what it is that I am yearning to gather around. Because I shared this idea with you, Tanya, last time, that the longing to kind of really to meet in circle with women of color in Zurich. And I got clear in different conversations with other women of color, like, yeah, that's not like, there's certain things that we do share, but there's an aspect that we don't share. And that is the aspect of confusion around the identity. And it seems to be that it's specific to, to a bicultural, but not just a bicultural, but a biracial identity within a framework or within a racist society, that there's like a confusion around power imbalance that I feel in my body, that I am curious to meet in me in the presence of other bodies that can feel that too. And the disempowerment around, like, there are literally parts I cannot stand for yet. And I have Black friends who don't understand, why can't you step up for yourself? Like, what is it? And I think I attribute it to the confusion in my identity, that I am, of my lineages, I am just as much oppressor as I am oppressed. And it's like, it's all in my cells. It dances together. And I, as a woman that is visibly not white, have to figure out how to stand in the world while my cells do some funky dance with each other. And then plus there's like my upbringing of a white and a Black parent and their dynamic with each other that is like deeply imprinted my understanding of the world. And it's so much. And it's like just so much that I want to be able to integrate and to find others that are, like, can we have a ground that is tender enough around the confusion of identity to actually unpack what this is that is like dancing in me. And that so often I feel the environments I'm in are just not understanding enough or not safe enough for me to reveal that.
The funky dance of confusion. What's that, Jack?
The words.
Her cells were doing. Like, we had to add that to the end, like the funky dance of confusion that her cells were doing. I mean, Sylvie, that is.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
It hits the nail on the head beautifully. It's literally like the oppressed.
There, we could just make that a strapline. Let's sort that. That's done. So,
the funky dance of confusion.
Yeah.
I'm noticing that kind of in spaces where, I was talking about being in spaces that have been created for women of colour, where I wanted to talk about my whiteness and it didn't feel appropriate. And that's why there's a leaning for me into spaces like this, because all of it's here. I'm not just one, and as we talked about the binary of it, it's like I'm not just. I have a light that when I, that does that whenever it flashes, whenever something that feels like, well, in my opinion, really profound. It does that. It's really funny. Anyway, profound statement acknowledged by my ancestors. It's so anyway, but they live here. They do live here. They do speak through my light. So let's go with that. Anyway, and so I have found that spaces where I can be all rather than just parts is why kind of in most spaces I can only be in my separate parts, and in a space like this I can be everything. And so that for me is why these spaces are so important. Well, they're profound for me because I can bring every part, the whiteness, the blackness, the not knowingness, the confusion, the parts of me that enjoy my whiteness, the parts of me that enjoy my, all of it, and no one, unless they have this experience, understands that. So yeah, and I noticed that I feel a bit embarrassed saying it, because it's like, oh, it doesn't feel completely comfortable to actually say that that's an experience that, sometimes it goes back to colorism. Like I have, I have benefited from that in so many ways, and I know that that's when we explore privilege. But actually, I've quite enjoyed it at times, and I can say stuff like that in a space like this because it's a privilege that we have, and I am oppressed. Then there's so it's everything, and it's here. If that makes any sense at all.
And it feels huge, as you say it. It's like, no wonder it's confusing when you hear it out loud in the clarity of words.
I remember, right, years ago, I had to do an essay, and I did an essay on my internalized racism, right? And as I was writing it, I just remember going, oh, I didn't know that's how I felt about my own blackness, right? Like, I was like, when you just like cannot believe that was actually a belief system that I had. And no words. So just, it's so vast. So how we've swallowed and swallowed and swallowed other people's ideas of who we are. So.
Yeah, I love the reveal part of the share. Like there's something like about this movement. Okay, like there's all like sometimes it's like this and I have to like pull out the right one. And right now it's just like, oh, there's this and I can just place it here. And then there's like this aspect and I can place it. And then there's this aspect. And that's to me, the power of this is like, oh, it's safe enough to just take out aspects and to not needing to defend any of them. And to not be confronted or challenged around any of them and just be like, I just want to let you in around this is part of my experience. And that I really love that. And so thank you so much for modeling that, Jax, of like, okay, this is this aspect that I often feel like there's no space for it. And right now I'm just taking it out. And there's like an aliveness that comes out when you do that. And it's just kind of like, oh, it's really beautiful.
And they were very happy to notice it.
They were very
happy.
I'll tell you a story. Something happened last night, going slightly on a tangent, but I'll bring it back. So I ran a grief and gratitude ritual last night, and the space that I ran it, there's a lot of activity outside, the humans in the room, and we were clearing up, and as we were clearing up, suddenly we heard this motor go on, and both myself and my friend I was running it with, who were sharing the holding of the space, we were like, what is that? This is in a space where there's no one else. It's in a craft village. The village is closed apart from this studio we're in. And we hear this motor go on and we're like, what is that? We're both like, and we look, and behind the screen, there's, the hoovers that go along the floor. It's turned itself on and it's starting to move out from under a cupboard, pushing the box that I used to pack all my bits in, and it's starting to clean up. And I'm like, oh, I think the ancestors are helping us tidy up. They're like, yeah, good work, good work. So yeah, and we notice Jax and I, when we're on calls and we say something, you know, when we're speaking often about this work as well, is that, you know, there's this like, what we consider is that the ancestors are like, yeah. The lights start to flash.
Then there are others that say, "You sure it's not just the dodgy light?" And I'm like, "No, it's not. It's the
It's selective, the dodgy light.
like it only comes out. It's fine now." And then let's see if we can get it to do it again. It won't do it now because I've said that. But yeah, so
You have to say something really
but it's
profound
funny.
again, though, Jack. No
I'll
pressure.
see if anything comes. Let's just see.
And I love this. How one moment we can be talking about these parts that are exiled and bringing them up, and then the next moment giggling away, and then coming back and going, oh, what's here? Is there confusion here in this moment?
I have this image that I want to share, which is kind of swirling in my head, and it literally is swirling, which is I have this idea of this kind of Sufi dancer, right? This kind of is me, right? So I have this idea of this Sufi dancer, and that's where I'm heading, which is this dance that is this twirling that brings me bliss, which is my life, right? That's where I'm heading. But the dance sometimes feels like that, like I twirl one way and the light's on, and I twirl the other way and I'm in a shadow, right? So there's this like twirling. And just in the instance of the light going on and off as I twirl, there's just this idea of my whiteness and my blackness, you know, just like this idea of like swirling between. Oh, look, see, like, see,
It's profound. It's profound. Oh my God, this is really profound.
Oh, I love this. Keep swirling.
I'm swirling dance.
Oh,
Right, yeah. So I have an image.
so profound.
It actually went off. And you know what? Actually, like in like when we're not laughing about it, right? I just shared that the light went off and went on in my dance, and the light literally went off and then is back on again. And kind of like that's how it feels. It's like I swirl between the shadow of it and the light of it, and the literal black and whiteness of it, you know. And that's just happening in my life all of the time. And there's confusion swirling there. And today I land in a place, as I've said, which is not even wanting to be tethered today, because this human race feels a little bit weird. So, yeah. Thank you.
I notice I have my mind is trying to, like, as I heard you name, Jax, that you're the joy of feeling your whiteness, that kind of is like, oh, like there's like also energy of celebration around that, of like, oh yeah, that's like something joyful. I noticed that in me this thought came up of how can I, like, I've spent most of my life in white environments, and most of my life I've spent in trying to fit into white environments. So I'm way more white than I am black culturally, because I have just spent so much time fitting into white communities. Yet I find it hard to claim my whiteness just because I don't look like I get to claim that. And I find it confusing because I also cannot, if I were to apply that, I can also not claim my blackness, because that also doesn't work. So it doesn't actually, there's no logic that follows there, but there's just yeah, I think there's more like a contextualization that my head offers of like, oh yeah, no, whiteness cannot be claimed unless others approve of that claim. Like, unless I can pass as white, I cannot claim my whiteness. But I'm so light skinned that I'm like, well, there's not much else I can claim, because if I claim my blackness, most black communities would be like, well, you are just very, very white. And I mean, especially like my heritage is Haitian, and when I've been to Haiti, it was like there was literally no one that could see me as nothing, anything else but white. Like that was just like, you're just white. Like there's nothing like, well, okay, like you pretend that you're also from here, but you're just white. Like just admit it, you're white. And yeah, so I think I'm just sitting with that that part of the confusion around like, how does it live in you when you claim and celebrate your whiteness? I think it's like a curiosity that, yeah. Like, is there an element of needing to prove something in that, or of like, or does that live in you as you are free to claim it for yourself independent of anyone else's acknowledgement of it?
Are you wanting me to respond? Should I respond? Is
This
that, yeah?
it's like, if you feel inspired, I'm noticing I expressed it as a direct question, but it's more like I don't expect an answer. I just wanted to share my curiosity.
Yeah, yeah. And something came up, which was simply that I think it's actually an acceptance of my whiteness, but not a there's no way that I'll ever be accepted as white. I mean, that's not even something that I even strive for or even want. That's not it. It's much more that I think I accept my whiteness from a the way I've been socialized. The fact that is actually my identity, as far as I am. You know, my community has typically been. I noticed there was something I was in the other day, and um I was holding space, and I kind of saw myself as colonizing the space, like quite powerfully being assertive. And I kind of walked away feeling like, oh my, is that a shadow, or is that okay? Is it okay to be that part of me as well? And I think I landed with, yeah, it absolutely is. When that's necessary, it's necessary. And it wasn't a, I suppose it wasn't coming from a colonizing kind of like well, maybe at some level it was, but at the expense of others. But I noticed those parts of me exist too. And they're not all about colonizing those parts. But I live in a society where I see the society that I live in is white, is westernized. And I know that place. And I celebrate that in me. And I also celebrate the fact that I notice I notice how it oppresses others. And I now know that. And so I lean into that as well to see how I can do things differently. But I do celebrate a lot of the fact that I've been born into this culture, that there's benefits in it for me. You know, there's a celebration in that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I noticed two words that came up as you were sharing there, Jax, for me. And the first word was power.
Mm.
And the kind of unspoken power that is like the soup that we swim in.
Yeah.
And then how that unspoken power, and what I speak of here is the whiteness, how that unspoken power can dilute the experience of the blackness. For
I
me.
can't quite get there, my love.
Yeah, I'm also curious about, like, can you say more about the
Yeah, I don't know if I can. It was just what it was. It was like, oh, okay. So it's like there's the power
Mhm.
of what has been, if we talk about British society, the power of having a white body
Mm.
and the parts and the existence of that within me, and how that power, when it sits into shadow energy, maybe let's say, is it can become oppressive. But what is oppressed within me at times is the blackness.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm.
It's hard to put into words.
Mm.
Did I hear you correctly? What you said, what is oppressive in me at times is my blackness?
No, is the whiteness, and that the whiteness has oppressed within me the blackness
Oh,
within
okay,
me.
okay. Yeah, then I was like, okay.
Yeah. Because the whiteness has been such a prominent internal experience that there wasn't much space. And then what happened for me was that when I really started to take the blinkers off to that, I was like, whiteness over there, like, I'm done. Like, there's no more room for you anymore. You've just kind of been leading the show and allowing the black parts of me to come back online. And for me, in many ways, that was a stage of my life that I really, the word that comes is reclamation. It was like, I need to bring this thread back in. I need to bring this thread back in. I need to travel to Dominica. I need to hear my father more. I need to understand, like, Caribbean culture, and really get to the roots. And then I'm there looking like a little white girl going, no.
Yeah. I'm really curious about this thread of power,
Mm.
and what I really feel in my own body is the intersectionality of oppression, of being a woman and my blackness, and that I grew up with a black mother and a white father. So it's very hard for me to discern in my body which oppression comes from the blackness and which comes from the womanhood, like which is the contributing factor to the power disparity that I have experienced of my white father and my black mother coming together and living together, and the subtleties of that power disparity that they did not actively work together in dismantling. So I notice that in my body, and as I heard you share about, like, like, I was like the channeling of the dominating force, or like the whiteness that you like, that you kind of labeled it with whiteness. I'm like, oh, like, I wonder for me, because I don't have like a white woman that I could source that power from, because I would have to source it from a white man. but I'm not a man. So it's not like, it's almost like that. I think growing up, it would be more easy to forget my non-whiteness than to forget my non-maleness. Like that's kind of like, it feels like it's like, I'm not a man. And yeah, so I find that intersectionality interesting of like, oh, like there's another confusion of like, I don't even know if it's because of being a woman or because of not being white. Like, where does it come from? Yeah, but there's definitely a strong intersectionality that I feel coming together in my body around it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, and it makes me curious. Is it I know it for you, Tanya, that you shared that your mother is white and your father is black. And how's it for you, Jax? Is it the same or what's the...
There's my mother's Irish, white Irish, and my father's Guyanese. And so, and I really feel it's in. So two things. One, I want to honour the fact that there's your words a moment ago, Sylvie, just as far as kind of the sense of kind of like from an intersectionality perspective, where is it? And I kind of hear the swirling of confusion in that too. And so that might be the wrong word to apply, but that's the sense I got when you were kind of talking about that. And the idea of power. And it feels important to mention that I kind of have done continue. I have this sitting here, which just made me giggle because it's the pendulum, isn't it? Like it's there she is. Like so moving up and down. And I'm like, I celebrate my whiteness, but I celebrate my blackness. And right now I feel centered in it. I celebrate both. It's not because I didn't bring celebrating my blackness in, and I celebrate both. And I get to walk in this beautiful body, right? Because in this beautiful package, because there's because there's the privileges that I have, and the fact that it is the fact that there's an honouring of I suppose there's an honouring of my blackness that I want to say is there's no word. The word grief was coming up, and the reason that was there was because of the experience that my kind of ancestral blackness have had to endure. You know, there's like that whole thing that then lands in me, like the breath that part of me breathes into me. I'm just like, wow, you know, I get to celebrate my whiteness and all that's brought to me, and I get to celebrate my blackness and all that's brought to me too. So yeah, right now my pendulum is kind of in the middle.
Yeah, I'm noticing as you say that the you know what the ancestors had to endure from oppression, and as I sit here, you know, I'm reminded that I come from slaves and witches. It's quite a lot to carry in one body. Yeah. Nice you like.
Pretty cool body.
Yeah. And from the witches, there's much medicine. You know, there's an uplift in that as well as the challenges. From the slaves, I don't feel that come through.
I feel like there's a level of, when we talk about confusion and absence of continuous threads of identity, that like for all of us, the blackness coming from the Americas and kind of coming through an experience of slavery and stripping of identity over generations. There's like I feel a depth of woundedness in that I don't experience in people whose Black parents come from Africa. That there's a sense of I can trace back, like this is the this is the village my parent comes from, this is the culture that they've immersed in, this is the religion, this is the customs. There's like a sense of healthy belonging that I can trace back through my parent, through my grandparent to somewhere. And the only thing I can trace back through my Black family is more confusion and more violence and more, violent stripping of identity. And I can't track that far to get to something that I can feel like, oh, this is deeply rooted. Like it's too many layers of wounding to get to like, oh yeah, this feels like a beautiful place of belonging. Yeah. So there's like a layer of belonging, but it's based on an identity of struggle. Yeah.
I know. When I asked my father about, those that came before him, and we start to go back, and he shares, every time he shares, I'm like, oh, it gets more confusing. Oh, it's so, and literally every question just opens a can of worms. Of displacement and, stories that are just like, oof. There's a lot to be celebrated as well. And there's been, so much confusion. And from that place, that's, often the place that I'm like, that's where my commitment to showing up in this life comes from. It's like, I've got a voice here. It's one voice, in moments, but I've got a voice to speak what couldn't be spoken. And unpick some of the confusion before I hand the baton of less confusion on, hopefully.
Yeah, this piece of the voice feels really central in my body as well. I haven't had the image in a while, but I used to have that image quite recurringly of having a lot of Black bodies in my back and standing in the first, like standing in front of a field of bodies and having the awareness that now it is up to me to speak. I feel the pressure of like of all the bodies that have no voice.
Yeah.
And it usually, like, this is usually what happens. Like, I often don't find enough space and stability in my body to deal with the energy that wants to come through, that like I tear up and I kind of, my body kind of goes into overwhelm mode, or into like there's just too much of it. So it's definitely this question: can I make my body steady and wide enough to or I don't even know if that's the question. Like, what is it that I need to do to bring out my voice? I don't even know if maybe there's like a boundary needed to kind of like to the back where like it's too much for one body. I don't know. I don't know if I can handle it, or if it's about widening my my stance to actually allow for that amount of energy to move through. But there's definitely like a kink around right now. There's too much energy and I'm too small for that to be a match. Yeah.
I want to shout. Community, community, community. This is it's coming through. I'm hearing it. Yeah, togetherness coming. Yeah, together. And what I've personally witnessed as we've, we have the blended roots community is that bringing the togetherness brings the voices through and gives that courage so that there's not just ancestral hands on backs, but actually living, breathing humans on this planet that go, yeah, we've got you. And, I'm feeling that here. And something Jax and I speak of often is the one of the absolute gifts of this experience is that we are the bridge between black and white. And in a time where there's so much separation, what you shared there of, it's like a huge responsibility. It's so much. But I really believe that in so many ways, we are the healers of these stories now. The bridge, the separation. And it is monumental for a moment in history. And no one can do it on their own. And we don't have to. And my voice gets stronger and less wobbly the more this community grows. In all spaces, be it, black, mixed, white. The wobbliness starts to soften and the clarity comes through. And then sometimes it gets wobbly again.
And yes, and I, as just seeing your tears, Sylvie, and there was something about what if there's a way of walking forward into the world, knowing that the DNA of us, that they are with us anyway. So walking forward and knowing that just by the healing that we do within ourselves together as we kind of hold each other's hands, that is kind of healing what went before without having to take on. It's not turning around and bringing it with us because it's in us already. It's running through our veins. So how does it look to walk forward, hold like Tanya and I on either side, holding your hand, yeah? Because that for me is the experience of where my voice comes from, in that all that went before, and I can be in the terror and the anger and the pain of that. And ultimately, the blood that runs through my body means I walk forward with the breath that they gave me to say, now go speak. Heal yourself, because in your healing, that's how you heal us. Walk forward. That's kind of how so there's an energy in it, but it's already in me. It runs through my veins. Yeah. So there's just, I hear the tears. And it's not our work to do their work. It's our work to do our work. It's my experience.
Yeah, that deeply resonates, this piece of, like, for me, the healing comes from voices spoken. And sometimes I don't know, is it my voice? Is it just a voice that needs to be spoken in this moment? It's not really, that sometimes doesn't feel super clear. Like, is it my personal voice, or is it just a voice that is needed to add more completion to all the voices being spoken? And I do believe that healing comes from all the voices being spoken and heard, and that the pressure of like there are voices here that have not yet been expressed or heard, and then the pressure builds up in my body around like I need to speak that voice, and not because it's the right voice, but because it needs to be added to the circle of voices.
Yeah.
And I feel deeply touched by the image that you just offered, Jax, of like, I don't know if there's like I guess a quite young part in me that I feel like I have um, leaned into community a lot over the last years, but it's been mainly in white spaces. So there's that part of me, that experience of me bringing in this kind of voice expression has been so isolating because there's been no one there to hold my hand. And I feel really touched about like, yeah, just this image of like, oh, if I could have the both of you on either hand of me, that would be so easy to speak. I mean, I could just like stand, feel the stability of through the hands and not being alone, and just speak. And I think there's like just like I feel a heaviness on my chest and some grief around. I've just been so lonely in feeling that pressure because usually I'm the only body in the space that feels it. And then I feel okay, now it's my body that needs to bring that voice out, and I'm risking everything. Like the fear of like my belonging is in question if I speak that voice. Like it's not guaranteed that I can still belong to this space after having spoken this voice. Feels just like I think it's just like a existential fear in my body, and yeah, so it feels very calming, the idea of having, oh, what if there were two more bodies with me? Yeah.
And then what if there were 10 more bodies and 20 more bodies and 30 more bodies? And more and more and more.
I feel my belly getting really soft and wide and big. It's really nice. The image of like so many bodies. It's like, oof.
Oof. I feel my body's like, I want to dance about that. And we often do dance, don't we, Jax, in those spaces where it's like it often bursts into dance.
Yeah.
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 I just want to name how much love I'm feeling in this moment.
I felt like I wanted to do that to you both. I was in the space of just honour you both.
Feeling really touched and in a very beautiful place of deep silence and wordlessness, just being with the both of you.
Feels like the perfect place to complete.
Yeah. I just had a vision of a circle, but it's of all of our ancestors, the three of us, just standing all the way around and just holding us as do this work, because effectively they are so pleased, is how it feels.
They've let us know that today.
They really are. They really are, but they feel pleased in this.
It's fascinating. It hasn't been doing that since that, like, it's been like steady
Yeah,
since.
it's really fascinating how it works. Yeah. So, and my ancestor altar's just here. So this is the room. I come in the morning and they flash, and I go, "Good morning." Nice catching up. So yeah,
Mm.
thank you, my darlings.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you both.